Right.
20, 25, 30%, and it's big. And the barista or the person on the other side of the counter is watching you.
And there's someone behind you watching you
And
too.
someone behind you. Sometimes even a
Judge.
whole line watching you. We're going to talk about tipping. It's one of those things that it's funny. It never goes in and out of style, but I believe that people are getting to a point where there is tipping fatigue. So just to set the context up, during the pandemic we had a ton of people, unsung heroes, that we realized, oh my goodness, like cleaners, drivers, all of the folks that are doing the things, the cashiers that were still, there to serve us food. And we were all sort of encouraged, and rightfully so, to start over-tipping when we went back into restaurants and things like that, because these industries were really hurting. Now we're at a time where you can actually go into, I can think of a cookie shop that does this, I can think of a couple of coffee shops that do this, and you go in and you pay for your drink, and then there's like a big iPad, and you can put in, sometimes it starts at 20%,
Right.
20, 25, 30%, and it's big. And the barista or the person on the other side of the counter is watching you.
And there's someone behind you watching you
And
too.
someone behind you. Sometimes even a whole line watching you, right? So as someone, like I've always gone the Oprah work, as the Oprah route, as someone who's on TV, I'm always going to over-tip, but now it's getting to the point, it's like, should I be tipping 40%? It's getting to be a lot.
Yeah.
So I want to hear your thoughts on tipping, when you should, when you shouldn't, and how do you feel about having your tip visible to the folks around you? What do you think, Arren?
I think you should tip.
Yeah.
A little goes a long way. I think that it's certainly raised and gone up. I mean, in Europe, there's not much tipping at all. No tipping in restaurants when we're in Portugal at all. Doesn't happen. When I was a kid working in a coffee shop, it was a cooperative. No tipping allowed. It used to confuse Americans entirely.
Yes.
Now, I think that you should tip, but you can't. Like, it's just comfort level.
Yes.
And if you can, you should. Something, I think, always.
And I think that for a lot of things.
Yeah.
I like the idea of if you can, you should.
Yeah.
I don't vote based on my tax bracket. I vote based on how can we help the most people.
Yeah,
and when you
absolutely.
have more, you should give more.
Yeah.
At the same time, we're heading into a recession, perhaps. And so money is going to be tighter for more people. So should they be expected to give more? And your thing is, if you can, do, and if you can't, don't.
A little something is, listen.
A little something is lovely if you can.
In your community, right? It's
Yeah.
helping people in your community.
Absolutely.
But the actual word is to ensure prompt service. So that's part of it too. If you're not getting great service, there's no obligation to tip. But I'm a really big over tipper.
Yes.
And one thing I think is really interesting, just now in Washington, D.C., it's the first place to vote that they would make sure everybody who works for tips also received minimum wage, because up until now they had a different lower minimum wage.
Yes.
So now they're all going to get $15, and that's going to make people think, do I now need to compensate as much for that wage difference? Because that was part of it too with your restaurant workers and stuff, but
absolutely,
it's pretty tricky, right?
That's actually where the whole idea of tipping came from. You're trying to make up the gap in their wage. You know, some folks are just working for tips. So so that makes a lot of sense to me. Christian, how do you feel about tipping?
I'm a notorious over-tipper, like ridiculous over-tipper. I don't know if it's white guilt or something about it, but I make sure I over-tip. I'm also that notorious person, if we go in a group and I can see that other people haven't tipped as much, I throw even more in. I throw even more in, and then I'll call them out later if I know I can call them out because they make good money and they should be tipping better.
Yes.
But I also think we just need to live in a society where we actually pay people a living wage to start with.
Yeah.
I would still be happy to tip you, even more than that.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be up to the customers to make up your rent.
Yeah.
Like, our minimum wage shouldn't be so low that that's a possibility that needs to happen right now. So
a lot
more than
of
happy
people,
to tip, but we should be a little bit better to begin with. Like,
I think a lot of folks would agree with that, and that everything, so many things are being downloaded to community care and to folks that are hardworking people that don't necessarily have the extra finances to be doing that.
Oh, can I tell you in LA now too, at the bottom of a restaurant bill, it'll say, do you want to add an additional 3% for health care? But we're not actually sure that the workers are getting the health care. I was in a situation where somebody I knew didn't get the health care. And I also read an article that not always the people who work in a restaurant get the tips straight up. So that makes it even more complicated. So I'm now about cash tips when somebody's been great. Here, I'm going to give you the cash and you deal with the company.
It's almost like we need to start discussing tip transparency.
It is,
right? So that you know who's getting the funds. Listen, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Good conversation, yeah.